I've been feeling really passionate about making this video. For some time now, I've been reflecting upon creation, and I think if you've stumbled upon this video, you might be feeling the same. 4 years ago, I made my very first YouTube video, and it was a huge surge of confidence and I guess an element of uncertainty within the process. And one thing that I look back on is the outcome of it, and it was really heartwarming to see the community that was built upon that first posting. And since then, my mind has been filled with ideas, and I've been feeling really creative and wanting to express myself. Recently, I was going through my camera roll and found years worth of footage on there of me trying to discuss different topics, but there was something within me that stopped me from posting all of it. And I look back at myself and often wonder why, what was stopping me. And I thought of this video idea, and I really wanted to go through the different thought patterns that might be inhibiting us. I thought this would be a good starting point for me because I think, like many others, through discussions, creation is something that's on the rise, and I think so many of us are passionate about it. And I think it's a really sad thing to see, knowing that it's themselves acting as an inhibitor from pursuing that. And if you're watching this video, it's your sign to get on there and put yourself out there, because having that passion is all you need to get yourself out there and to essentially pursue a career in this field. I think getting the camera out can be such a challenge. I think it's something that we've been raised with, watching YouTube and other forms of media, but I don't think it's something that's really advocated for on the same level as conventional routes. And I think on the forefront of my mind, the conventional route just seemed like the right choice. And if you've been around here, we're all about unconventionality. If you are watching this video, I really want you to hold on to the dream of being a creator and to really know that regardless of what stage you're in, it's never too late to get into it. I think it's an important discussion to have because I think it's something that's largely unspoken, and I think through voicing it, it would become a shared experience and something that we can normalize and overcome together. I really hope you guys enjoy this video, and I'm really excited to get into the following points. The first point I really wanted to talk about is self-doubts. I think as individuals, we can often be our worst critics, and I think when it comes to starting something new, we can often be really hypocritical of ourselves throughout the process. And often, I think we ourselves view our work through a different lens as opposed to how other people would. And there was definitely a point with creating or trying anything new where I would hyperfixate on the problems, or I would even create problems with something, essentially eliminating the humanistic part of something and striving for perfection in order to avoid any problems that might come about. And I think the standard I set for myself would be that essentially nothing would ever be good enough. And with that mindset, it's really difficult to make progress within anything, because I think a pivotal part of making progress is making mistakes. And I think the fear of making a mistake altogether would basically create inaction. I have so many videos just stored on my phone, but none of them have really ever made the light of day. And I think it's because we often overcomplicate things and go down to that kind of perfectionism standard that we set for ourselves, or even having a very fixed view of how the outcome should be. And the standard is not only in creating, I think it's in the outcome. It's the idea that we envision having our first viral video, or we want our video to have a certain number of views or likes or gain a certain level of traction. And I think sometimes our kind of interest or investment in the outcome can kind of create this kind of disillusionment with the present moment, or where our priorities should be. And often the actions that we are supposed to take in the present moment are plenty simpler than the big kind of dream that we have in our mind, because whilst that is something that I would love for each and every person to have stored in their mind, the pressure that comes with achieving that is something that detaches us from all of our goals. And I think we see this in day-to-day life. And one thing I've noticed as an adult is just the challenges in picking up new hobbies. Sometimes I find that I've lost the meaning behind what a hobby is, and upon reflection, I do realize that it's supposed to be an outlet where I can express myself or feel good or be able to express those suppressed emotions in a really calm and relaxing way. But what I find is comparing myself to experts within the field and immediately feeling disheartened when my work doesn't really match up to that standard. And I think for me, that's been the biggest setback in, I guess, adhering to something in the long term. I think when we start something, our brains often jump to the worst case scenario. What if I fail? What if things go badly? And I think it's really easy to exacerbate things to the worst case scenario. But then I think it's the brain's coping mechanism of just preparing us for the worst case situation. But I think as an individual, we require that kind of mental reconditioning where we can detach ourselves from these worries. And that's something that I've really had to learn and understand that these worries are not our pre-written fates, but instead our brain's just trying to protect us from any form of danger. And I also think that when it comes to the kind of outcomes that we're surrounded by numbers and metrics and views and likes, I think it's really important to essentially reshape what we want to get out of something. Instead of putting a hard number on what we want to get out of a video or anything creative, I think it's important for us to broaden our perspectives and think instead, what have I learned from something? Have I been able to better myself off of this experience? And have I been able to learn a new skill? Or do I feel better after doing this? I think it's that kind of mental reframing that allows us to create a win out of anything that we do. And I think that's something that really benefits us in the long term and I guess allows us to maximize and make the most out of any activity. Also, I think it's really important to acknowledge that our fears only represent one half of the coin. What if things do go well? What if we do make success out of it? I think often we dwell so much on the bad. I think the bad and the negative thoughts are so all-consuming. I think we often forget that there is that hope and optimism for a good outcome as well. And without trying, we're never going to know. And it would be incorrect for us to validate those negative thoughts when we haven't created action yet. And we never really know what we can achieve until we try. And for me, I've always found that the anticipation of something has always been far worse than what the reality has actually entailed. And for me, the best way to overcome these kinds of feelings of self-doubt has been action. As difficult as it is, executing it is never as bad as what we play it out to be in our minds. I think it's really important for us not to, I guess, put ourselves down or feel as though we failed before we started, because that is absolutely not the case at all. The next point I really wanted to talk about is perfectionism. And this, to a large extent, really goes hand in hand with the self-doubts. And it's a really interesting point because sometimes I really do wonder, does perfect even exist? And is this something that I'm actually striving for? Because I think inherent to human nature, I think we're all naturally imperfect and different. But I think when it comes to putting ourselves out there in creation, I think it's those imperfections and quirks that I embrace the most. When it comes to resonating with people's content, I think I do so because of those imperfections and the ability for people to embrace those vulnerabilities. Yet, when it comes to the standard we set for ourselves, it's nearly as though we need to be beyond who we are at this present moment, and that's not the case at all. I think a big part of creating and putting ourselves out there is just embracing our authentic selves. And I think it's really important to acknowledge that perfect is just a really subjective term and something that means something different for every single person. One thing with me is that I spend a lot of time planning, and I think plans are important to a certain extent, but I don't think plans are there to eliminate every risk that you may come across. And often when I think about topics and how I want to explore them, I think there's always going to be an element of incompleteness to what we say or what we do, But I think that's like a large component of being human. It's the idea that there's always going to be room for improvement and there's always going to be another critiquing perspective. But I think that's an amazing thing because it drives collaboration, and I think the world is evolving so much and there's always going to be new factors that are going to come into play. And our understanding of everything is always in flux. There's always going to be more considerations and more things to add, more risks. And part of growth is understanding that there's always going to be some room to implement new things or to incorporate new perspectives. I truly believe that instead of trying to achieve completeness in whatever we do, I think what we should be prioritizing is our own perspectives, because I think that's what we have the most power over. I think it's so important to do our research and it's so important to read and consume as much as we can, but I think the planning can only exist to a certain extent. And I think one thing that we undervalue is how we interpret that information, or what we're going to make out of what we've been given. And we can spend our whole lives learning and preparing for something and we'll still never be completely prepared. But it's also understanding that the learning is not through consuming and preparing yourself before the act, but actually through experience. And being able to start what you want to do is the best way to learn something. And I think for me, it's been about cultivating that balance and understanding that, yes, there might not be a completeness to what I'm doing right now, but as I gain more experience, I'm going to be able to do a better job at it and better prepare myself. I've been feeling these emotions a little extra recently. As someone who recently graduated uni, it kind of feels as though I've entered the world and I'm in this process of building my life for myself. But I think I tend to look at the end product and think about all of the steps to get there, but it's knowing that I'm not too sure how I'll get there because it's such a non-linear process. And the most important thing amidst all of this is to take the first step. The next thing I really wanted to talk about is comparison. And I do think this is such a dangerous emotion because I think oftentimes when we compare ourselves, it's done in a really strategic way to reaffirm that negative self-perception that we have in ourselves. And I think comparison is such a subjective term because in actuality, two different things, two different beings with unique qualities and attributes and insight and learnings, they can't be compared. There's no one person is better than the other, and there's no baseline standard to be able to do something. And I think everybody has something different to offer, and often it's all about perception, and it's really difficult because when we live in our own minds, we're really exposed to one line of thinking, one way of thinking. And I think it's really important, I believe, to communicate with other people and get different perspectives and be able to see beyond ourselves, because in actuality, oftentimes, it's really important to get those different views in order to rationalize our thoughts and be able to think about other ways of approaching the way in which we think. I think it's really important to acknowledge that there isn't a set way to achieve success. And for me, it's been about letting go of those structures that I've set within my mind and letting things flow and come about as they will. Because in actuality, there's room for everyone within a creative space. And a lot of it is just about embracing who you are and letting go of the shackles and restrictions that you set upon yourself. The next thought pattern I wanted to talk about is projecting into the future. And I think as someone who recently graduated university, I'm currently in this in-between process of figuring out what my next steps are going to be. And I think often when I think about my future, I have a really crisp image of what that would entail. And when I think about all of these images I have within my mind in terms of career path, I envision myself deep into a particular line of career, and I find myself in deep rabbit holes on Google trying to understand the exact path to get there. I end up just staying in a phase of contemplation, being aware of the different paths to take, but not taking action because I'm scared of what the outcome of that would be, or I'm scared of making the wrong decision or something that doesn't align with me. But when I step back, things are a lot better. And one thing that I've been able to fully acknowledge to myself is the fact that I've got time. And I think the biggest takeaway is as well is that you're never really stuck onto one path. I think life is about trying as many things as possible. And I also think it's about being agile and having those transferable skills. And I think a big thing, the only guaranteed thing in life is change. So I think being able to adapt to that and embrace that is going to be what carries all of us through all of those challenging moments. I think a big part of what makes things so definitive is the kind of labels that we place onto something. And I think it takes away from the experience of just trying something out and embracing something for what it is, because I think there are some inexplicable or undescribable moments. And I think when you step into something, it's the daunting aspect of, is this what I'm doing for life now? Or is this the set career that I'm working towards? And you never need to put the pressure of defining the experience like that, but instead just being present within it and actually getting a feel for whether you like something or not. Also, don't let the shackles of having a permanent title take away from the explorative part of your mind that wants to just try something for the sake of it, because I think you should, because in the long term, it's going to direct you to where you're supposed to go and essentially provide you with all of these insights and learnings. The process is messy and complicated, but I think it's really important to just embrace it and trust where we're being directed. The next section of this video I really wanted to title, But What Will They Think? And I think this really comes down to the value we place on the perspectives of others. I think it can be really challenging, especially at a young age or within our formative years, where we feel as though we want to put ourselves out there and try out these unconventional things, but we're relying on instinct solely. I think there's a balance to this. I think growing up, I found it really, really difficult to just act on those things that felt kind of out of the norm. And I think for the long time, I really wanted to just conform to what I thought was conventionality and following that tried and tested pipeline of what I knew worked for the people around me, but even more importantly, what I saw my peers doing as well. And I think all of that is just such important data, but I think also it's about having that balance where we can trust ourselves as well. And because we want to do something, it doesn't instinctively make it a wrong decision. And if it's different to what other people are doing as well, it's important to trust ourselves in that regard as well. And I think it's really important to acknowledge that nobody knows ourselves better than ourselves. So I think it's really important to ensure that if we feel passionate about something, that we do hold value to our perspectives and be able to and explore that within whatever capacity we are able to within a given circumstance. It's a really challenging one because I think at different phases of life, there are different responsibilities and different factors that come into play. But I think it's really important not to neglect those aspirations as well, and not to devalue them because we don't see the people around us pursuing the same things. But I also think when we consider the perspectives of other people, in my personal view, I always thought that maybe it would be looked upon maybe negatively. And the reason why I've thought about it in this particular way is because at times I've had a negative bias on myself. So I naturally project that onto what others might think of me, when in actuality, that's not representative of the perspectives that are around you. And I think it's really important to not set those definitive labels on how something will be received without trying it out. That is everything that I had to share on the topic. I do feel as though there is definitely more aspects to discuss, and I'm excited to explore this again at some point, and hopefully at a later point. And as always, if you have any feedback, I'd love to hear it. And it was really nice getting to openly discuss all of these thought patterns, and I'm really excited to start creating more videos and share more of my perspectives. It was really rewarding making this video because I think I do tend to journal a lot about all of these kinds of points, but it was a totally different experience vocalizing it, and it really did feel as though I was speaking to a friend, and that was something that I really enjoyed, and I do feel very relieved after this, and I'm really excited to make more videos like these if that's something that interests you. But thank you so much for tuning into this video.